Today's topic, our first ever Ask Me Anything. I have waited for this moment from the moment I wanted to create a YouTube channel. We finally have enough questions where I can create an entire video just based on your actual questions. I don't know where they all came from. We had a huge spike, which is fantastic. I already have enough for our next set of videos too, coming out obviously next month as we hit that recording cycle. So in today's video, I'm going to walk through, I believe it's 4 or 5 questions. And if you're thinking, how did you get those questions? Well, I'm glad you asked. If you scroll down to our show notes, there is a link. There's a little finger pointing towards it. It's one of these side fingers. It goes this way. And it says, follow us on socials, join our weekly newsletter, get our free ebook and more. And then it says go.wealthkill.com. That is an all-in-one link. So if you click on that link, you'll then see a few different things pop up, like our website, our social media handles. But the second one on there literally says send us questions for YouTube. And we did revamp this recently, and I think maybe that's why it's a little bit easier to find and we're getting more questions. So if you have a question that you would like covered on one of our future Ask Me Anything, scroll down, drop that in there, send us your question. You can also put questions in the comments, but I realize that depending on what your level is on, hey, I want to be public or I want to be more private, that leads you to a Google form that we're the only ones that see that. So before we get into the questions, let me read you the questions. And here's what we got today. So first one, when and how should I start putting money aside for current or future children? Fantastic. Number 2, should I consolidate my 401k from a previous job before medical school or residency, or is it better to leave it as is? What steps can I take if I accidentally overcontributed to my Roth IRA, a newly married individual? I have a student loan balance of less than $50,000, which I have the capability of paying, but is it wise to hold off until I'm done negotiating with jobs to help them possibly pay for it? Can you please discuss disability insurance in more detail? If we get it now as residents, does it guarantee our income as attendees? Why is it so expensive? 5 fantastic questions in our first ever Ask Me Anything. Stay tuned. We dig into all 5 of those with answers and analysis coming up next. Okay, first question. When and how should I start putting aside money for current or future children? A fantastic question. When I think about funding for kids and setting money aside, the first account that always comes to mind to me is the 529 plan. It's an easy place to put money away for college spending, college funding, I should say. Now, there are other options too, right? You could have just a basic bank account set up. Maybe that's in the name of mom and dad. Maybe it's in the child's name. It depends on your feeling for that. But regardless, setting up a bank account, look at some of the good online banks like the Allies, the Marcus, where you can get a decent yield and actually get paid to put money aside. Now, if you're sitting there saying, well, hey, it's not money we're going to use for a while, I think this is where a taxable account could make a lot of sense. This is also where a 529 plan can make a lot of sense. As you're sitting here, whether you have kids or plan to have kids, one of the easiest spots to go to would be saving in advance, whether that's through basic bank account, maybe it's a 529 plan, maybe it's a taxable investment account in your name or a joint account in both the parents' names. There's also another account called an UTMA or an UGMA, which essentially is just a taxable account, but it has a trust built into it for our children. The downside I always say to UTMAs and UGMAs are that once they hit the age of majority in that state, they get the funds no matter what. There's also some FAFSA effects, but if you're watching this in our core demographic of physicians, probably not going to get a ton of financial aid, at least needs-based financial aid. So that's where I'd be looking here with either current children or future planning for children. All right, number 2 on the list. Should I consolidate my 401k from my previous job before med school or residency, or is it better to leave it as is? First, it always comes down to kind of reviewing, right? What's your current 401k look like in terms of good, low-cost investment options, right? Are the fees low? Are the investment options good? What does your future plan or your next plan look like? Does that have good, low-cost investment options? Good low fees inside of there, good index funds? If they're the same, I always want to usually get into that new plan, right? It just keeps things organized. Usually when we take on new client, we say it's kind of a form of like spring cleaning where we're just trying to get everything into that plan because they were at this employer for a little bit. Here was their residency, then they had their fellowship, and they had this one research job in between where they got some money into a 401k, 403b, then we're getting them all cleaned up. For whatever reason, if your new 401k plan is not that great. Maybe it's expensive, maybe it doesn't have good investment options, maybe it's both. There's nothing wrong with keeping that old 401k plan. Keep that in mind. You don't have to move them over. And that's usually how I'll look at it. Now, again, for our physicians, we usually avoid IRAs because then it's going to throw off our backdoor Roths. But if for some reason you're not going to do backdoor Roths, or you just say, hey, I don't like Roths, hopefully you don't say that, but let's just say you did, you can also roll those into an IRA where you have a little bit more control. Again, I don't love that option for not only physicians, but really any high income earners, because then it's going to blow up our opportunity to do that backdoor Roth. So in short, should I consolidate? No, the number one answer in personal finance, right? It depends. The good news is the 401k landscape has gotten a lot more competitive in a good way, where most 401k plans are the equivalent. If your new 401k plan is better, right? Lower cost options, good index funds, sure, definitely move that over. So it depends. Most of the time you should be in a good spot to roll it into your most recent plan. And in that way, it's a lot easier to keep track of going forward too, right? So if anything, at least do some spring cleaning here. Make sure it's all in one spot. Maybe that's the old 401k plan, because that's a good one. I usually will throw a shout out here to the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan. Good, low cost, easy to understand plan, where sometimes we'll have clients keep that account just because it could be a good spot to consolidate other accounts into down the line. All right, our third question. What steps can I take if I accidentally over-contributed to my Roth? Newly married. So in this example, there is a process where you remove excess contribution. So if you over contributed to the Roth, you got to remove that contribution. You're going to do this with your custodian. Remember, custodian is just a fancy term for a Fidelity or a Vanguard or a Schwab. They're going to help you remove that excess contribution. Here's the part that's important for them. They also need to calculate if there's a gain, right? They need to also remove that. This is the part I always chuckle about. If you watch some of our videos in the past, I always say, you're not going to believe the process. You're going to think this is silly. But once you get that excess removed, then you can start the backdoor Roth IRA process, where now you can take that money, put it into an IRA, again, following contribution limits. Still got to follow contribution limits. This is a non-deductible contribution, right? Make sure you have no other IRAs, no traditional IRA, no SEP IRA, no simple IRA. Get it into your IRA, then convert it to that same Roth, and then get it invested. It's one of those things where when I explain it to most people, they're like, you're joking, right? I'm like, I'm not. I wish I was, I'm not. But that's how you would fix it. So first things first, you got to remove that excess contribution. Your custodian will help you. It's pretty simple, like 1-2 page form. They'll also help figure out any gains on that or losses, help you get that removed. Once that's all fixed up, then you can start the backdoor Roth IRA process to eventually get funds right back into that Roth IRA. All right, next up, I have student loan balance of less than $50,000, which is also just great news on its own. I have the capability of paying this back now, but would it be wise to hold this off until it's time to negotiate my new contract with my next job, who could help pay for it? I'm going to say yes here, right? Here's why. Now, you don't want to drag your feet too long. Right now, if they were federal loans, right, we just pretty much had no interest rate on them for how long. If they're a private rate, that's where I'll get a little bit nervous here, because let's just say it is an 8, 9, 10% rate. We don't want to drag this out too long, right? Because there's just interest accruing on that. The reason why I say yes is because we've seen a lot of employers say, hey, we want to see proof of your student loans, and then we'll either help with a payment plan, or we can do some type of sign-on bonus, right? So I would pump the brakes here. I would see if you can negotiate this. Maybe you never have to prove the loans, right? Maybe you just say, hey, I have loans. They take your word for it. They give you an extra student loan bonus per se. Again, probably taxable income, things of that nature, but that wasn't the goal of the question, right? Can we use that as leverage is the main question. I do believe it's possible because we've seen it, right? We've seen it with some employers, and they do want to see documentation of that. And the reason why I also say yes so confidently is this individual also knows they have the funds to pay it off. So even if it doesn't help us, or they don't give us any bonus, we can pay it right off, right? That's really important, and that's one of my favorite things about really debt management. Or if there's any type of opportunity or arbitrage in there, if you have the money to pay that off, it's always there for you. But if you're doing better because of what you set up, in this example, keeping the 50,000 around, or around 50,000, to leverage that in a contract negotiation to maybe get those paid off, or at least increase your bonus, fantastic. So I put a yes on this one. All right, one of my favorite questions, last one for our first ever Ask Me Anything. Can you please discuss disability insurance in more detail? If we get it now as residents, does it guarantee our income as attendees? Why is it so expensive? I'm going to start with the last part. Why is disability so expensive? Private disability insurance is so expensive because it is insuring your most valuable asset. That's your ability to wake up every day and go to work. Now, if you're watching this as an early career physician, how many years do you have working, right? 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? What's your average salary, right? 200, 300,000 per year. Some specialties higher than that, maybe some specialties a little bit lower than that. But regardless, we're talking millions of dollars, right? It's insuring millions of dollars. That's why disability is expensive. Unfortunately, it's even more expensive for female physicians. Always note that in there. Life insurance is the exact opposite, but when you work with advisors like myself, where we're noting, hey, use term life insurance is relatively inexpensive as is. So that's why it's expensive. Part two of the question, if we get it now as residents, does it guarantee our income as attendees? Kind of, right? A lot of these policies that you can buy in training usually are anywhere from, the insurance numbers anywhere from $5,000 to about $7,500 per month. It can depend on your specialty. In your training, overinsured in that example, right? That almost insures 100% of your salary, where most insurance companies are only going to insure about 60 to 70% of your income, because on a private plan, remember, this is completely tax-free income. So you're overinsured when you buy this in your training, whether that's your residency or your fellowship. So it does spill over a little bit into your attending status. So it does insure some of that. The big thing you're looking for here on these policies is you want the future increase rider, right? You want a rider on that policy that will allow you to increase your policy with no health questions asked. This is probably the most valuable rider in all of disability insurance, but especially early on in your career, where then you can maybe increase that policy all the way up to $20,000, or even, I think some even go up to $30,000 now per month. So that would really, really cover your attending income. And discussing disability insurance in more detail, I'm just going to add one more note here. Because of their note about residents, one of the biggest things to keep an eye on in your training, again, residency or fellowship, is a GSI, Guaranteed Standard Issue Policy. I cannot yell this from the rooftops enough, but if you're watching this in training, this could be a policy that you get with no health questions asked. If there's blemishes on your records, fear not, my friend, you're okay. If you're a female physician, some providers still offer unisex plans. This is a huge cost savings for you. And remember, as I just said, this is a plan that's not only going to cover you in your training, but also once you become an attendee. And that's why it's so important to possibly lock in that unisex rate. Very important for females. Males, it doesn't really do anything for you. But I will say for the male physicians, no underwriting is really important. Here's the caveat. You cannot apply somewhere else and be denied. This is one of my biggest pet peeves from insurance salespeople, insurance brokers, is they completely avoid the GSI. And unfortunately, they usually do it for the wrong reasons. They don't get paid. There's only one GSI provider per program. And if it's not them, they're likely not going to tell you about it because they don't get paid. And if you go through traditional underwriting and you get denied, you can never come back to that GSI policy. Not to mention that blemish sticks with you for a long time, right? So if you're watching this video and you're in your training, check out your programs, check in with HR if you have a GSI, a Guaranteed Standard Issue Policy. That is one of the biggest wins you can get in terms of risk management, not only now, but as you go forward. So that's our fifth one here on our first ever Ask Me Anything. As I noted at the start of the video, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see where you can type in a question for us using that link in there. As I say it too, I'm just going to make sure I can tell you exactly what the link says. Again, it says go.wealthdeal.com. Click on that. It'll take you to our all-in-one spot. You'll see a few different links in there, but the second one on there should be send us a question. Send us questions. I love this stuff. I love doing more of a live conversation here. If we start to really see it pick up, maybe we'll even do a YouTube live at some point, but send us your questions. Love to get you on the next episode. Also, comments. You can just drop us comments, but I know sometimes when we personal finance is more personal than it is finance, so I get it, but that's why we want to give you that link. It just takes you to a Google form. We'll never give out any personal information. As you just saw in this video, I'm just reading the question, and then I'm going to answer it based on what I can see in that question. So thanks for hanging out with me for the last, we had 10 minutes or so here on our first ever Ask Me Anything. Subscribe to the channel. You get the little bell icon over here. You'll also get a notification anytime we release a new video. Again, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you on the next video.